So it's been 2 months since I've actually had a paying client. And there's a good reason for that. 5 weeks ago, we had our third baby, a sweet baby girl, which is incredible. But that means for a little while, work got put on the back burner. And that's one of the realities of being a freelancer that I want to talk a little bit about is how to navigate finding work, keeping clients, getting paid while also having real life circumstances, finding ways to take time off to be with family, to have our priorities in line while still maintaining the momentum we need in our business. But before we go too much into that, we are finally getting back to paying work and paying clients. And I want to run you through a couple of the jobs that I got to work on this week because they were really interesting and kind of exciting. The first actually came from a networking opportunity from a friendship and a relationship built with another local filmmaker here in the Nashville area. So this was a friend of a friend, the way most connections start. We had coffee, talked filmmaking, talked life, family, all things videography. Hit it off, had a great connection, and he was able to hire me out to come help for a client that he was shooting brand content and testimonials for. So we shot for a chiropractor. What was really interesting about this shoot is we were trying to squeeze in a lot of different looks into one pretty small office. So you can see in some of this BTS when we're setting up for our first interview, that's one of 5 different interview scenes or sets that we set up in this small chiropractor's office that we're working hard to really flag off those overhead lights. Like most doctor's office, kind of corporate buildings, you have these kind of harsh overhead light that we didn't have any control of. So we brought in the 4x4 black floppy to really try and flag that off and make the image as nice and aesthetically pretty as we actually could. So overall, pretty happy with what we were able to do given the space. You can see this image from that first interview there. I think we got some good contrast, some good shadows on the face. The background isn't perfect, it's not amazing, but I think it still works for what we're able to do in the space that we had. Now, in between interviews, we were also capturing some B-roll of chiropractics and different work that this office does that will be overlaid into a brand video as a whole. So as you can see, as we're moving along, we're setting up a couple different interview locations. Like I said, 5 in all, and I'll run through some stills and some clips from these different interview sets. A lot of this was shot on my 2 cameras, on my FX30 and my A7 IV, but Kyle, who hired me, also had an FX3, so I don't have all the footage because I don't have what he shot on his FX3, so I don't have both angles on all these interviews. But overall, given the parameters of this shoot, really happy with the images. It was really fun to get to work with another creative, another filmmaker who's super talented. Kyle brings a really great eye and some great expertise to the table. And so one of the things we were talking about on the shoot is just how fun it is to be able to learn from each other and kind of steal little tips and tricks about how the other approaches lighting, cinematography. Even watching him work with the client, watching the relational piece of that was really insightful to me. And then just hearing some of the vision he was casting, both in sharing about the job with me, but then also in talking to the client directly, was really helpful for me from the business side of things. Because ultimately, just like networking is how I ultimately got hired for this job, relationships are how we also find and get and keep paying clients. And that's such an important lesson and reminder as we're thinking about the business side or the relational side of this whole freelance thing. So really fun job there. Happy with how it all turned out. Now the second project I got to work on this week was a really unique one and a really fun one. This is an internal piece of content for a business, sort of like a staff morale, staff booster piece. It won't really be seen by anybody that's not on staff, but just a fun internal piece for them. So 2 camera setup. I shot this on the Dizio Vespid Primes on the 50 and the 21, and then I also used the 90mm macro for some B-roll. But you can see we're out in a garden. So the challenge and trick with this shoot was dealing with natural light. It was a partly cloudy day, mostly sunny, and so the lighting, 1, was changing as clouds would roll by and the exposure would shift. But 2, we shot this around 9:30, and 10 in the morning. So while it wasn't peak noon overhead sun, the sun was definitely a huge factor here. So the way we set this up out in this garden, so I just put the sun behind the client as much as possible to have as much backlit, and then tried to ND down just to get exposure as good as I can. So what I ended up doing was leaning on the side of overexposing just a little. Shot all this in S-Log3, so exposing to the right on the waveform just to try and retain as much information as we could, and then in bringing that down in post a little bit, I think it was able to capture some pretty clean images. I'll put a couple of those here. I went with a more artistic color grade, you could say, push some of the colors a little bit more, but I'm really happy with how this image turned out. I am loving these cinema lenses. It's so fun getting to create with this glass and just having some of that, I guess character would be the word, in the image. So really fun experience shooting on these two cameras, getting to shoot this really fun kind of project in this fun setting, this beautiful location out in this garden. I also had one non-paying job this past week that I got to shoot. I actually shot yesterday, which was a super fun project. Call it a spec project or just a passion project. It's two buddy of mine that are starting a company called 3%. They're both therapists and men who are talking about masculinity in the modern age, what it means to be emotionally healthy men, and how to engage in those conversations. Really amazing company. Really love the work that they're doing, and I'm helping them shoot some content because I just love them and I love the vision and mission of what they're trying to build. So yesterday we shot a part of a series we're calling Walk and Talk, which are these longer form conversations around issues and topics of emotional health as it relates to men and masculinity, doing different activities while we engage those conversations. So yesterday it was playing basketball while having a conversation around the challenges of being emotionally honest in our relationships, our friendships, our marriages. So really cool content. Shot about a half an hour worth of conversation. This was all on my A7 IV running on a gimbal. So I don't get to pull out my gimbal a ton. And to be honest, I had to do a little refresher when I first pulled it out to figure out exactly what settings I wanted to use. But I did love using it. And the image I think is really compelling for this kind of work, these longer form movement-driven pieces, because I think, we're not just trying to recreate a podcast here, although certainly the conversational nature of the video maybe feels similar to what the content of a podcast would be, but the idea is to model how to have real conversations in real life, not just sitting in a studio, but out shooting hoops with your friends. Or the other one we shot was a real conversation around suicidality and depression while playing around a disc golf, right? So that modeling, I think, is super powerful, and having something that's visually appealing and engaging and relatable as sort of the medium for those conversations, I think is really cool and really helpful. So I put some screenshots up. You can see what that image looked like. Overall, really happy with how this one came out. It was a unique challenge. One, because it was raining on and off periodically, so I actually used a little rain cover over the camera and gimbal, which meant I couldn't see the screen very well, so it was just sort of hoping that the autofocus was really doing great work, and for the most part it did. There are a couple shots that are the autofocus locked onto the wrong person in the conversation, but I think it's certainly forgivable. And then just in sort of really putting a heavy grade on the image, it was really able to kind of balance out the exposure. So once again, love the dynamic range and the flexibility that you get shooting everything in S-Log 3, and overall happy with how this one turned out. So like I was saying at the beginning of this video, one of the big challenges of being a freelance videographer, but really a freelance in any kind of industry, is inevitably when life circumstances come up or when you need time off, you don't have that reliable paycheck that you can bank on to continue to help you pay your bills. Now, thankfully for me, this is a part-time job and I do have a full-time job as well. So financially, we were covered kind of through these 5 weeks that I took off from creative work or from filmmaking. But I think the theme of this video and what this really comes down to, the takeaway and the lesson for me, is that relationships are king. It really is all about who you know and who's in your network, and being able to fall back on relational equity that you've built up in these seasons where maybe you don't have the bandwidth to go out and find your own work or your own clients. And that's something for me at the point in my filmmaking career that I'm at, where I don't really have retainer clients that I'm working with at the moment, where I don't have a big Rolodex of past clients that I can easily hit up to do more work for. A lot of my work has sort of been one-offs or odd jobs here and there, which I'm grateful for and I enjoy doing. In these 5 weeks, what really I think would have been helpful would have been having a more robust Rolodex of other filmmakers in my network that maybe I could hit up to second shoot for occasionally. Because it's not that I didn't have any time to work at all, it's that I just didn't have the time, the bandwidth, the mental capacity to go and do a lot of cold calling, a lot of cold approaching, marketing on my own to try and find and close paying clients. So that's something that I'm really pressing back into now that that sort of paternity leave leave, so to speak, is up for me, that I'm trying to get back to working on a regular basis, I'm finding the difference is the investment in other filmmakers. It's the investment in relationships. I've had coffee with 3 different filmmakers in the past 3 weeks here in the area, and from that, now I'm starting to see paying work coming back my way as some of these other filmmakers are able to hire me back on. So I really do think, I've heard Jared with Film Club Productions say something like this, but action brings action. I'm sure that's not original to him, but that's where I heard it on his YouTube channel, and I think there's so much truth to that. Investing in relationships, spending time networking, and helping each other out, right? Because now, not only do I have people that can potentially hire me if they get clients, but also as I'm doing the work now to kind of hit the ground and find my own clients, I now have other gaffers, other cinematographers, other videographers that I can hire out to come help me on some bigger projects. And ultimately, a rising tide raises all ships. So that's a big takeaway for me. Excited for these projects, really like the images and just the experience I was able to get out of these, and excited to be working again. I do have 2 more shoots on the book for May, which I'm excited about. So we're getting back into a really regular rhythm. I'll bring you guys along for the behind the scenes of those. I hope this is helpful, just getting to hear a little bit of my process, my thoughts, what's working for me. I know that's what I love about YouTube, is getting to watch other filmmakers' journeys and learn and glean from them and their experiences. So let me know down in the comments what you're working on, what's been helpful, what hasn't been. Love to engage down there. I always try to respond to every comment, because ultimately the community is what's most valuable, just getting to learn from one another. So appreciate you guys hanging out, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.